The file on my desk trembled with each tap of my fingernail against the mahogany. Outside the office window, a crimson McLaren spun to a neat stop in my circular drive, its paint flaring like a cut in the afternoon light. My stomach didn't drop. It steadied. I knew exactly why she'd come. Elena, Anna, my housekeeper, pushed in breath tight. That woman insists on entering. She's holding documents, looks like an eviction. Let her in, I said, closing my laptop on a stack of acquisition models. And Anna record everything, quietly. For 20 years, I'd learned how to be underestimated. Charity luncheons, committee minutes, polite smiles, all the camouflage a woman needs, while she builds something men don't bother to see. Today, the camouflage could come off. Her heels announced her before she did sharp clicks ricocheting through the marble foyer. She was flawless in a way that required money, and surgeons' long legs, a sculpted jaw, a scent that arrived a step ahead of her. Sloane Hale. My ex-husband's new wife paused in the doorway and smiled like a verdict. "You have 48 hours to vacate," she said, dropping a leather folio so hard papers fanned across the desk. Carrick Lux Properties acquired this entire community. We're leveling these tired mansions and building something worthy. Her gaze skimmed my black dress. I'm sure minimalism feels comforting. I took in the dress of the most expensive invisibility cloak I own and gestured to the antique armchairs I'd brought in from Lyon. Tea. I don't have time for pageants. Sloane nudged the folio with a manicured finger. Sign the acknowledgement, or I call security. How efficient, I murmured, opening my laptop again. And your father would be? Reginald Carrick. Obviously. Her mouth tilted. He says this place has been mismanaged for years. I remembered Carrick's pitch from last month, the emails that multiplied after he failed to get a meeting with Helios Development's owner. Helios. The quiet syndicate that has been buying irreplaceable soil one parcel at a time. My syndicate. Does Mr. Carrick know you're here? I asked. Daddy lets me handle deals, she said lightly. Victor told me you begged to keep this house in the divorce. It's sad. My phone buzzed. A message from Naya. My CFO Carrick's revised proposal had landed ambitious on headlines, thin on financing. I slid the phone aside. Tell me about your plan, I said, giving Anna, half hidden behind a vase, a tiny nod. What happens after the bulldozers? Clean lines, glass, people who actually belong in luxury communities. She looked past me, dismissing the paneling that Architectural Digest had called a masterclass in restraint. You wouldn't understand, and you're certain Carrick owns this ground. The deal closed last week, she snapped. Carrick owns the houses, the golf course, the clubhouse. This is a courtesy. That's curious, I said softly, because the security firm you threatened to call invoices Helios Management. I authorized those payments. Her confidence faltered. Excuse me. I turned the laptop so she could see open tabs with 30 proposal spreadsheet signatures. Your father's last offer to Helios Development to partner or sell was creative, ultimately not adequate. You're bluffing, she said, but the word thinned. Men like Victor never asked what I did between luncheons, I said. They assumed the house was all I had. She reached for her phone. I need to call my father. I think that's wise. And when you do, please mention you tried to evict the owner of his favorite acquisition target. I lifted my cup. One more note, the McLaren is in a fire lane. I'd hate for it to be towed. Color drained from her face. She gathered the folio in a rustle of leather and left the way she'd come heel suddenly less certain. Anna reappeared with fresh tea and a steady look. Send the video to legal, she asked. Please, and call the property manager. We'll conduct a compliance review of every Carrick leasehold. My phone lit again, Reginald Carrick. I let it roll to voicemail and dialed a different number. Mr. Kwan, I said when my attorney answered about the expedited strategy we sketched for Carrick Lux. Let's advance the timeline. I closed the office door. Outside, the afternoon returned to its gentler noises, as if nothing had shifted. But everything had. The next morning, my phone began vibrating before sunrise first, a withheld number, then a familiar one. Reginald Carrick. I let both calls roll to voicemail and watched the light move across the floorboards, inching toward the edge of my desk like a tide coming in. Anna slid in a tray, coffee steel-cut oats, and a neatly folded printout of last night's compliance notes. Per your request, she said. Security confirmed 3 calls from Mr. Carrick. Also maintenance log that the McLaren blocked the hydrant for 23 minutes. Photo attached. Thank you. I spooned a mouthful of oats and opened the Helios control panel. Naya had already posted an overnight digest lender chatter spread movements on Carrick's callable notes, a banker's rumor about a margin call at a private credit fund with a suspiciously Carrick-shaped exposure. Our opportunity window had widened overnight. At 8:02 a.m., Anna buzzed. Gatehouse reports a Bentley idling at the entrance, Ms. Ward. 2 occupants. I flicked the security feed to full screen. Even through the gray morning, the outline was unmistakable. Reginald ironed to a razor in the driver's seat. Sloan hair knotted into a bun that tried and failed to look effortless. The makeup bravura of yesterday had thinned. Behind them, a security SUV waited the guard, tapping a stylus against a tablet. "Let them in," I said, "but direct escort to the office, no detours." As Anna relayed the instruction, I opened a Zoom window and admitted a grid of familiar faces. Our board had been scheduled for a strategic check-in next week. I'd moved it to now. "Morning, everyone," I said. "We may have some unexpected theater." "Leave your mics muted. If I address you, unmute, smile, and be kind." Rectangles brightened Amaya, our chair in a cream cardigan. Ruth de la Cruz, who'd negotiated 3 cities into rezoning land that men had said would never move. Dr. Patel, our data skeptic, whose eyebrows could cross-examine a spreadsheet. And Naya Neat Bun, and a calm that belied the speed at which her mind could rip a balance sheet to threads. The office door opened without a knock. Reginald strode in like a man who cultivated access as currency chin-high shoes muted against the rug. Sloan followed her eyes flicking to the Zoom grid and back a fraction too late to disguise the flinch. "Ms. Ward," Reginald said, extending a hand he expected I would take. "We should speak privately." "Of course," I said, and gestured to the 2 antique chairs angled toward the camera. "Please. The Helios board will appreciate transparency." His hand froze mid-air. "I wasn't aware we'd be on the record." "Consider it good governance." I took my seat. "You first." He sat. Sloan perched. The chair's silk caught a smudge of yesterday's mascara along the welt. "This is a misunderstanding," Reginald began. His voice was built for earnings calls, brisk velvet, with a hint of expensive gravel. "My daughter was overzealous. She thought we had finalized. Ownership," I finished gently. An easy assumption when one's PR team writes faster than one's legal team reads. A screen in the corner flickered on. Naya had posted a slide selected Carrick announcements versus recorded closings. A simple table with a devastating line of red announced pending term sheet, no filing located. Reginald didn't turn his head to look, but I could see the way his pupils dilated, measuring how much we knew, and from where we'd learned it. Sloan cleared her throat. "I came to apologize for the tone yesterday." "Tone is cosmetic," I said. "We're discussing substance." Reginald clasped his hands. "We can still find a path together. Carrick Lux has reached relationships in municipalities that take years to cultivate. You have capital." My proposal was revised at 1:13 a.m. Naya's voice came crisp as she unmuted. "The new draft letter increases purchase multiples by a half-turn, extends exclusivity to 90 days, and is still contingent on debt you haven't lined up." Reginald's head snapped toward the speaker. "And you are our CFO," I said, "and the person lenders prefer to speak to when the math matters. I don't appreciate the implication that we fabricate facts." He smiled, but it bared too many teeth. "Not fabrication," I said. "Sequencing. You announce acquisitions to create momentum to finance them. Momentum breeds confidence. Confidence loosens purse strings. An old game, only the calendar is less forgiving now than it used to be." Dr. Patel unmuted. "Your quarterly cash flow statements show seasonality that doesn't match your entitlement timeline. You're pulling deposits before permits, which suggests bridge funding has dried up. That's not sustainable." "Who is your lender of record on your last 3 purchases?" Naya added. "The filings show a different special purpose vehicle each time. That many SPVs means you're juggling covenants." Reginald's jaw tightened. "We structure opportunistically." "You structure because you have to," I said softly. "We don't. That's the difference." Sloane's composure thinned another degree. She looked at me, not the board. "What do you want?" "Finality," I said. "For both of us." Anna reappeared with a tray of water and left like a whisperer. I slid 2 documents across the desk. One was thinner on heavy paper, with our crest blind embossed at the top, the other thick enough to doorstop. "The first," I said, "is an exclusivity and standstill. 30 days. You agree not to shop Carrick to anyone else, not to announce anything you haven't actually closed, and not to layer new debt. In return, Helios provides a revolving working capital facility at 100 basis points over your last secured line, guaranteeing payroll and critical vendor payments while we look under every stone. Reginald's eyebrow jerked. A DIP facility in all but name. Call it what you like. It prevents a fire sale while we proceed like adults. And the second he asked, touching the thick document with 2 fingers as if it might burn. Asset purchase agreement. We buy the operating subsidiary selected SPV's development rights that actually exist and intellectual property. We do not buy litigation you haven't disclosed, promises you made over cocktails or reputations that can't pass due diligence. I leaned back. We close in 2 phases. Phase 1, lien release and carve-outs. Phase 2, consolidation and integration. Your holdings that violate our community covenants are vacated within 15 days of Phase 1 closing standard lease compliance. We're not evicting, we're enforcing rules your team signed. Sloane flinched. She understood before her father did what that meant. Reginald tried to smirk. You imagine I'll sign away a company I built for 3 decades on the strength of your resentment? Resentment is noisy, I said. I prefer quiet things. Math, timing, options. For example, Naya's slide changed. Carrick debt maturity wall, next 90 days. A cascade of dates and amounts. A red bar glowed at day 27. We've spoken with 2 of your lenders, Naya said. They will consent to a sale at a discount rather than litigate across 12 jurisdictions. Our term sheet is on their desks. They've already cleared the conflict checks. Reginald's composure slipped. A single breath snagged. He didn't ask how we'd gotten the meetings. He knew the same way he had once gotten meetings with a track record that made the meetings their idea. Amaya, unmuted voice warm. Reginald, this path preserves jobs and the projects that deserve to live. Your alternative is public collapse. Elena's giving you option value. Take it. He turned finally to the Zoom grid, taking in the faces he'd misjudged before he'd met them. Women whose names never made the press because they preferred it that way. What about my equity? He asked, a final foothold. You keep your dignity, I said. And a consulting arrangement for 12 months at a public rate non-compete, attach no board seat, no vetoes. You will be thanked for decades of service and free to take early mornings and long walks. Or you can play hero refuse and watch vendors learn new acronyms. CRO, BR, 363. He looked as though he might spit. Then Sloane put a hand on his sleeve, a gesture so unstudied it surprised me. Dad, she said softly, please. His shoulders sagged, the posture of a man who could still do math. He reached for the exclusivity document first scanned and signed. Then he opened the asset purchase agreement. He read faster than I expected. He wasn't a fool, only a believer in old myths. When he found the clause about vacating Carrick-held residences that were in breach of covenants, he paused. The pen hovered. You're going to throw us out. I'm going to treat you like every other resident, I said. Exactly, and only that. He signed. Thank you, I said, and meant it. Naya will coordinate lender consents. Mr. Kwan will shepherd filings. We'll announce nothing until we have something. Another thing, Naya said. We'll need a list of all related party transactions for the last 36 months. Names, entities, invoices. No gaps. Reginald nodded, once brave again now that a path existed. He would help. It was all he could do. I turned to Sloane. Her posture had changed, less feline, more human. The flinty gleam of performance had dulled to something closer to a question. I was awful yesterday, she said. I believed what I was told. Most of us do, I said. I opened a drawer and withdrew a business card in thick mat stock. Mira Cho. A woman who'd taken a bank's last worst territory and turned it into a talent farm for women who were tired of being given the assistant's chair. She runs Foundations, our industry boot camp. If you want to build rather than inherit, start Monday. 7 a.m. Leave the car at home. You'll be riding to job sites. Wear boots you can scuff. She took the card like a lit wick. If I say yes, will you? Hate me less. I considered. Hate wastes returns. I prefer investment. A breath that might have been a laugh escaped her. She tucked the card into the inside pocket of her blazer, where a pocket square might have lived on a different life. Reginald rose. We'll expect discretion. You'll have it, I said. And compliance. They left with a different pace than they'd entered, a fraction slower, a fraction lighter, as if the hallway had lengthened while they were inside, and a smaller future now fit within it. When the door closed, the Zoom grid came alive. Applause dusted the speakers, polite and genuine. "Beautifully navigated," Amaya said. "You gave him a way out that wasn't humiliation." "He gave it to himself," I said. "We just priced it." Ruth de la Cruz leaned closer to her camera. "You are going to announce at Citicorp Summit, aren't you?" "Yes," I said. "Not as a victory lap, as a case study in risk management and the cost of underestimating competence because it wears a black dress. Make room for a slide on sequencing risk," Dr. Patel said. "The room needs that vocabulary." "Already in draft," Naya added. "Also, legal needs 5 signatures for lien release, will messenger." "Send them," I said, "and Naya loop in Marcus at North Point. His fund can swallow the debt we don't want." "On it." We ended the call. The office stilled. The house inhaled. I dialed Mr. Kwan. He answered on the first ring, voice wry. "Did he bleed on the rug?" "Just ink," I said. "Exclusivity signed. APA executed contingent on lender consents and confirmatory diligence. I want the lien release package out before lunch." "You're an optimist." "I'm organized," I said. "There's a difference." When I hung up, I stepped to the window. The Bentley rolled through the gates and out onto the boulevard. Sun found the chrome and branched into bright twigs across the hood. In my mind, I saw a different car, Victor's, and the face that had believed a woman's schedule could only hold yoga and orthodontist appointments, not cap tables, and core sample reports. Old anger moved through me like weather brief cleansing gone. Anna knocked once and came in. "Mr. Carrick forgot this," she said, setting a leather folder on my desk. Inside a draft press release already formatted for morning distribution, Carrick Lux acquires Helios Managed Community. New era of modern luxury, with a blank space for a quote from me that I would never give. "Shall I shred?" she asked. "Not yet," I said, sliding the document into a drawer. "Keep the artifact. It's useful to remember the story people tell themselves right up until reality edits the last line." Akaim announced a new message from Naya. 3 lenders consented. "Fourth wants a call. North Point Inn. Marcus asks for a cap on legal fees. I told him no, and he laughed and said fine. We're moving." I sent a single thumbs up, and then another message to the Gatehouse lift vendor, holds for Carrick payroll only. No capex without Naya's sign-off. Then I opened the Citicorp Summit deck and dragged a new slide to the front, case study when announcements replace assets. The cursor blinked in the title box. I typed and deleted and typed again, testing tones like fabrics. Anger was a poor tailor. Precision fit better. The phone buzzed again. A new caller ID, Victor Hale. I watched the name ring on the glass, felt nothing, and let it vanish. He would have learned by now. Sloane's text Reginald's signature, the crunch, as corporate narrative becomes math. The first time a man like Victor feels consequence, he checks the foundation and finally learns it wasn't his house after all. I returned to the deck. For the first time in months, I allowed myself to consider what would follow the summit, a mentorship launched scholarships named not after my ex-husband's lineage, but after women who'd labored without plaque or portrait. Mira would design the curriculum. Ruth would build the municipal rotations. Anna, who understood discretion better than half the bankers in the city, would speak in the module on operational trust. The office door cracked open again. Naya leaned in without ceremony, which meant urgency. 2 more things, she said. First, our property manager flagged 3 Carrick-held units and breached short-term rentals against covenant. I've prepared notices. "Send them," I said. Second, I received an email from a junior at Carrick, Liam Cho. She paused. He says he's been pushing back on the announcements for months. He's the one who leaked to the lenders that internal approvals didn't exist. He's asking for a seat somewhere. "Hire him," I said. "Let him sit near Dr. Patel for a quarter. If he survives, promote him." Naya's mouth tipped. "Consider it done." When she left, I gathered the documents into a tidy stack, the ceremonial act of a morning's war. I walked them to the safe, spun the dial, closed the door with a sound I never tired of, a simple, satisfied click. Before I left the office, I paused and looked at the chair where Sloane had sat, mascara marks still faint on the thread. There was a girl there, barely out of a story she hadn't written. Perhaps she would learn. Perhaps she would not. My job was to offer the class, not pass the exam for her. On my way through the foyer, I stopped at a side table where a single photo faced the wall. I turned it around. My grandmother back straight in a wool dress she'd mended twice, standing in front of a house she'd bought cash when no bank would lend to a woman. She had given me the first seed money for Helios with a check and a sentence. Make something I couldn't. I had made it. Now I would make more. Not bigger, wiser. By noon, consent letters were returning signed like migrating birds finding their way home. By 3, the first vendor payroll ran with Helios funds a half day ahead of the rumor mill. By 5, an email from Reginald. Thank you for the clarity. Not contrition, not effusion, clarity. The only sentiment I trusted. At 6, I took the long way back to my office after a walk through the East Garden. The jacaranda had dropped a purple frost across the path petals like small vows underfoot. Inside, Anna had left a card on my blotter. Her handwriting precise. Ms. Cho, confirmed Monday 7th Hosuru a.m. Ms. Hale, request to shadow payroll review tomorrow. I smiled despite myself. I picked up my pen and wrote a note for Anna to deliver in the morning. Sloan arrive in work pants, no heels. Bring a notebook. You will outline by end of day the difference between a press release and a purchase agreement. I set the note aside and turned off the desk lamp. The house settled again into evening, a place like any other, except for what it had witnessed and what it allowed me to do within it. Outside, a siren threaded the dusk and faded. Somewhere, a Bentley turned onto a different street than the one it had taken yesterday. On my counter, my phone lit intermittently with the life of a company changing hand signatures, initials, acronyms that mean we're not guessing anymore. On the lock screen, the last voicemail waited from Reginald recorded at dawn before Courage had a contract. Ms. Ward, this is complicated. I deleted it without listening to the rest. We had already reduced complicated to paper and paper to action. There would be lawsuits, of course. There always are. Some plaintiff's firm would claim we'd strong-armed a patriarch. I would answer with covenants consents and a parade of employees whose checks had cleared because we moved when math said move. City Core would get its theater, the lenders would get their money, and a young woman would get a pair of boots dirty enough to be proud of. I stood in the doorway and looked once more at the desk where the folder had thumped the chair, where fear had perched the window, where morning had revealed a car at a gate, and the difference between access and ownership. Then I closed the door on part 2 of the story I had not planned to tell, and went to water the orchids my grandmother had taught me to keep a stubborn bloom that prefers patience to spectacle. The petals opening exactly when they mean to, and not a minute sooner. City Core Summit began with the sound of escalators and ambition. Banners draped the convention center like pennants, pictures of towers, parks, promises. I arrived before 8, the floor still damp from the overnight polish, and walked the perimeter once the way a pilot checks a fuselage. My badge read, Elena Ward Helios Development. The line beneath keynote looked smaller in print than it felt in the bones. Backstage Naya had colonized a folding table with a laptop backup drives and a printed set of our slides clipped like a legal pad. Dr. Patel stood beside her arms folded, eyes on a chart that glowed against the concrete wall. Sequencing risk. 3 boxes and an arrow. Announce, finance, close versus finance, close. Announce. The difference between theater and architecture. Lenders finished their last consent, Naya said without looking up. North Point wire hits in an hour. Press release is staged but dark. We push only after you say case study. And Carrick payroll, I asked. Funded. Vendors green. No capex without my ink. She glanced up. You slept? Enough to remember nouns, I said. Amaya reached us in a whisper of cream wool and hugged me in the way women do when they've learned to make room for one another's armor. Tell the truth cleanly, she said. Let them hear the verbs. I changed into the black dress in a backstage bathroom that smelled of lemon and steam. The fabric was simple, the kind that looks like nothing until it fits like an argument you no longer have to make. When I stepped into the wing, the main hall had filled to its seams. I saw heads I recognized, developers, mayors, fund managers, and a few I knew mostly by the wakes they left in other people's stories. 2 faces near the front were familiar for different reasons. Reginald pale and taut. Victor coltish in a suit that pretended not to notice its own expense. A third face was absent, and I felt the absence like a small Mercy Sloan. She was where she belonged on a site visit with Mira's team, learning the difference between brochures and soil. The host's introduction washed over me in professional warmth. Then the light shifted and it was my turn. Success in real estate, I began, is measured in what actually stands at the end of the quarter. A small laugh folded through the room and then settled. We are paid for things that exist. Streets you can walk, doors that open, apartments where the first hot shower works. Slide 1 case study. When announcements replace assets, a photo in the corner. An eviction notice time stamped its edges, curled as if embarrassed by itself. I didn't name names. I didn't need to. Last week at a property, my company manages a young woman arrived with papers and certainty. She believed this community had been acquired. She believed a press release was a deed. What she didn't know is that our security invoices go where the ownership is real. A stir ran through the room. Recognition or gossip or both. I let it move. Then I clicked to the next slide. Announced versus closed public claims versus recorded facts. A simple table like the one Naya had shown Reginald, but with the serial numbers removed. Red bars told the story plainly. Sequencing, I said. When you announce to create momentum instead of announcing to reflect reality, you convert your company into a momentum product. It trades on belief. Belief is volatile. Credit committees are not moved by adjectives. I watched Victor shift his jaw, working on something unswallowable. The first time a man hears the word adjective used as a threat, he either learns it or dismisses it and pays later. He had always been fond of later. Slide 3. Debt maturity wall next 90 days. Numbers and calendar blocks clean and terrible. If your next 3 months look like this, I said your courage must rhyme with your cash. A ripple of notes scribbled. A photo or two. I didn't linger. The most efficient mercy is clarity. In the past week, Helios executed an asset purchase agreement for a portfolio many of you admired from a distance. We did it quietly with the consent of lenders and the cooperation of a founder who loves his employees more than his headlines. A beat. We will say his name today only once, thank you, Mr. Carrick, and then we will stop saying it and start paying people to build. A murmur, this time softer. Reginald stared at the floor. He had asked for discretion, and I was giving it in the only currency that mattered, not humiliating him for sport. Here is what we did not do. I continued. We did not punish residents who followed the rules. We did enforce covenants that were signed by those who thought covenants were paper. A community is a contract. It's also a neighborhood. We honor both. Slide 4. Operating principles. I kept them as unpoetic as possible. Finance first, close second, announce third. No PR without a purchase order. No debt without a plan to sleep at night. The audience listened the way people listen when the weather breaks. And because talent is not a demographic, I said, we're launching Foundations, a year-long mentorship track for women in development and operations. This is not a networking dinner. It's job sites at dawn, budgets at noon, public meetings at 6. Nothing about this work is tidy. Women are good at things that are not tidy. The applause started thin, and then built not a standing ovation, thank God I distrust those, but a sound like competent people agreeing in public. When the sound eased, I closed with 3 projects Helios would move into commercial, a riverfront redevelopment, a transit-adjacent mixed use, and a set of industrial conversions that would not be called lofts until they deserved the name. Thank you, I said. If you're looking for adjectives, the bar is across the street. If you're looking for verbs, I'll be backstage for 10 minutes, and then in a lender breakout with hard chairs and bad coffee. I stepped off the stage into a pocket of dark and exhaled. Naya's grin had edges. Perfect, she said. Press in 5. I'll push the release when you reach case study, already did. Lenders love the cash rhymes with courage line. Marcus texted amen, which I will never forgive you for. Forgive me for this first, I said, and handed her my clicker. I'm going to find water before the questions become theology. The press room had the temperament of a stockroom lights too bright, questions the same. Was the case study about Carrick? We don't discuss counterparties. Will employees be retained? Project teams will be kept intact where they perform. Where they don't, we train them to perform. Are you the first woman to control a portfolio of this size in the region? The first to do it this quietly, perhaps. When I emerged, Reginald waited in the hall like a man who had mistaken a door for a wall and found it opened. He inclined his head. Thank you for the restraint. Thank you for the math, I said. It made the restraint possible. He hesitated. My daughter is on site with foundations, I said. She was early. Something passed over his face that was both grief and relief. She never liked the offices, he said. Only the part where the concrete smells like rain. Then she's where she should be. Victor came at me before security could decide he might. He had that look people get when they're trying to knit anger into dignity and the yarn breaks. You humiliated me, he said softly, murderously, the way men who don't want microphones to hear them speak when microphones might. I didn't say your name, I said. You didn't need to. Everyone knows we were married, I supplied. Once. And now we were nothing. And now we are less than that. Victor, if you would like a conversation, ask a question. He took a breath that sounded like a craft breaking. Did you cut my contract? I didn't sign it. I said. Carrick's restructuring team reviewed vendor rosters. Your consultancy had deliverables that were adjectives. You'll receive a letter and a check for work performed that can be measured. He blinked, stunned by the idea that measuring could be a verb with teeth. You are cruel. No, I said, I'm exact. He stepped back like he touched a rail. You always were good at paperwork. Paper pays the people who pour the concrete, I said. Go home, Victor. Find a job where nouns matter. Security flowed discreetly between us and carried his heat away. I watched him until he turned a corner and became someone else's story. In the lender breakout, the chairs were indeed hard, and the coffee worse. I sat with a half-dozen credit officers whose expressions were identical across banks, curious, cautious, hungry. We walked through the integration schedule. The lien releases the cash waterfall, the first 3 contractor audits. When I said we will not announce leasing targets until we have signed leases, a woman from a regional bank actually closed her eyes like I'd handed her a glass of water. Afterward, I took 10 minutes in the green room to let my heartbeat iron itself flat. A text from Mira waited. Your recruit showed up in boots, asked good questions, took notes when nobody else did. We put her on punch lists. She did not flinch. A photo followed Sloane in a hard hat too big for her eyes, narrowed at a doorframe, a pencil tucked behind one ear the way competence does it. I felt something warm and unsentimental surfacing pride in a person I did not own. Naya slipped in with updates. Vendor rumors under control, she said. City permits office wants a coffee. Dr. Patel says 3 reporters actually scribbled the term sequencing risk like it's a new dessert. Good, I said. If we get that phrase into 2 mayoral talking points in one newsroom, we've won something bigger than a case study. Also, Naya added a junior reporter cornered Liam after the breakout. He deflected like a pro. He's nervous but useful. He'll stop being nervous when useful becomes a habit. I let the day taper a meeting with a union rep who had heard too many empty promises and appreciated unornamented verbs. A handshake with a planner who had been waiting 2 years for someone to treat a bus schedule like a covenant. A quick call to Anna to check the house and the orchids and the inbox labeled noise. By late afternoon, the main hall smelled like tired cologne and the sweet decay of lanyards. Awards were being arranged somewhere for people who like plaques. On my way out, I crossed the lobby and saw Reginald again, this time seated alone, hands folded on a program he hadn't opened. He looked smaller but more accurate, like an overexposed photograph corrected to its real light. Take a walk, I said as I passed. It helps. He nodded. My daughter sent me a picture of a doorframe, he said almost to himself. She said she learned what plum means. It's a good word, I said. Things either are or they aren't. Outside, the evening had the crispness of a page that wants writing. I slid into the sensible car that had become a quiet signature and let the driver merge us into ordinary traffic. My phone lit with a last message from Sloane. No apologies this time, just... What's the difference between a punch list and a scope gap? I think I know, but I want the precise definition. I smiled and typed the answer without flourish. Words are tools. So are women. So is patience. At home, the orchids were still open, and the house unchanged, a study in restraint that had outlived 100 stories about who deserved what. I placed the keynote badge in a drawer beside my grandmother's checkbook. Empty, now kept for its lesson, and wrote Monday's note for foundations, week 1 concrete. Week 2 covenants. Week 3 cash, 3 good nouns, 3 better verbs. The day had been a ledger written in public. It balanced. Monday began in the color before daylight, the hour concrete prefers. I arrived at the riverfront site at 6:42 a.m., wind off the water, carrying the mineral smell of rebar and rain. The fence banners still read Helios Quiet Work. Inside the gate, hard hats bobbed like punctuation in a paragraph that had not yet found its verbs. Mira Cho stood with a clipboard and a mug that could double as a hammer. "Your recruit's early," she said, tilting her chin toward the trailer steps. Sloane sat there in scuffed work pants and borrowed boots helmet. Crooked a pencil tucked behind one ear, a notebook already open to a page titled Week 1 Concrete. She looked up at us without the old performance in her eyes. "Morning," she said, and almost smiled. "I brought questions." "Good," Mira said. "Questions are cheap. Answers cost sweat." She pointed to a slab where forms framed a rectangle of wet certainty. "Walk." We took a triangle through the site staging area, pour schedule the grid of bars that make floors behave. At each stop, Mira handed Sloane a definition, then a test. Plumb level cover. Sloane wrote fast and wrong, once crossed it out, wrote again. When a truck tilted a little too long at the gate, she noticed before I did. When a foreman called a scope gap a punch item. She paused the conversation with a raised hand, polite enough to pass, firm enough to hold. "What you're describing," she said carefully, "is a change, not an imperfection. It belongs on a change order, not a punch list." The foreman squinted at her name sticker, then at Mira, then at me. Mira lifted a shoulder. "She's right." The foreman sighed, then laughed like a man relieved to be caught. "Fine. We'll paper it." "Thank you," Sloane said, and wrote CO punch in letters big enough to read from a catwalk. I left them in the geometry of their morning and walked the perimeter once alone. Naya's overnight message hummed in my pocket. Lien releases recorded, vendor audits phase 1 complete, payroll clean, rumor mill quiet. Mr. Kwan had forwarded 2 letters that arrived late Sunday, one from a plaintiff's firm auditioning for work on behalf of shareholders, another from an attorney who signed with the confidence of a man who had not yet read a covenant. Both went into a folder labeled noise. Math would do what it always does. Paper would make it legal. At 9, I headed uptown for the integration meeting. Our boardroom was full of the ordinary heroism of departments that touch reality ops with their red pens, community with their calendars, legal with their rectangles of caution. On the wall, Dart Patel had pinned 3 charts, cash, waterfall, vendor tiers, a heat map of permit dependencies. "Good morning," Amaya said, tapping her pen against a yellow pad. "Let's make today smaller." We did one decision at a time. We approved 5 vendor extensions and rejected 2. We moved a lease-up target back a month and wrote the word honest next to it. We kept the Carrick project manager on a warehouse conversion because his team's work papers were astonishingly neat. When someone suggested a press hit to celebrate the acquisition, now that it was safe, I said no. We would celebrate when the first tenant stove lit on the first try. Midway through the agenda, Anna slipped me an envelope hand-addressed in tidy block letters. Inside a note on fine paper and a photograph Reginald from 20 years ago, hair darker, holding a toddler on a job site that had since been crushed and reimagined. The note was 5 lines. "Thank you for the clarity. I am walking more." She sent me a picture of a doorframe. "We spoke about plum. It is a good word." R. I set the photo on the table's edge like a bookmark marking a previous chapter. Then we finished the page we were on. By noon, foundations gathered in the Helios training room, 12 women in boots and ambition, nervous and restless in equal measure. Mira led with a short speech about verbs. Naya followed with a ledger that did not blink. Then it was my turn. "I won't promise easy," I said. "I will promise nouns, concrete, covenants, cash. If you learn to respect them in that order, the rest is theater. Theater is lovely. It does not hold a beam." They didn't clap. I hadn't asked for it. They wrote. Sloane sat in the second row. She didn't look at me for affirmation. She looked at the page. In the afternoon, the first integration rumor broke in a trade blog with a headline light on vowels and heavy on heat. Victor texted, possibly between lunches with people who hadn't yet read the article. "You did this to humiliate me." I typed a reply and deleted it, then typed the one that fit. "We didn't do anything to you. We did something for the work. I put his number in a folder labeled Archive and closed it. At 4, I went back to the riverfront site because offices make good decisions, but sites tell the truth. The slab had cured enough to hold a boot at the edge. Mira walked me along the forms and narrated the day a delivery rerouted. A mismeasured window corrected on paper before it became regret. Sloane stood with a superintendent reviewing a log of RFIs. She asked a question so exact, I felt the grin tug at my mouth before I could suppress it. "Can I interrupt?" I asked when there was a seam. "I've got a small piece of theater." Mira arched an eyebrow. "Careful. Promise." I handed Sloane a folded page. She opened it and blinked. "What is it?" she asked. "A lease compliance audit," I said. 3 Carrick-held units, 1 operating out of covenant. I could deliver it through legal. I'm asking you to deliver it with context. She read it again slower. Her face sorted itself into the same expression I imagined my own wore the first time someone higher than me trusted me with a decision that would make an enemy either way. "What's the right tone?" she asked at last. "Exact," I said. "Not cruel." She nodded and tucked the paper into her notebook as if it were an instrument, not a weapon. "I'll write the letter. May I run it by Anna for polish?" "Yes," I said, "and copy Naya for the numbers. Copy Mr. Kwan for the teeth." The sun slid down behind a crane. The site turned the color of a photograph that will look like memory in an album nobody will open until a decade flips. By 6, the first Foundations Day had emptied itself into homework. I stopped in the training room before leaving. The tables smelled faintly of pencil shavings and coffee. The chalkboard bore a sentence Mira had written in block letters, "We are paid to make things stand." Sloane's notebook lay open to a page of cramped script. At the corner, a corner folded up, I could see the word plum underlined twice. At home, the orchids held their stubborn brightness. Anna had left a small tray tea, a pastry with a sugar crust, and the lease compliance letter Sloane had drafted marked with 3 edits in Anna's precise hand. The letter was clean. It made me proud for the second time that day, and I signed it without changing a comma. Before the lamp, I opened the drawer that holds my grandmother's empty checkbook and set Reginald's photograph beside it. 3 lives in a neat line, the woman who wrote the first check, the man who wrote the last apology, the girl who might yet learn to build. My phone buzzed once more. "Mira, your mentee asked why we measure twice." I told her because concrete forgives slowly, and budgets never do. A second later, Sloane sent the letter. "No adjectives." I wrote back a single word that had saved me 100 times good. Outside the city made its evening noises, sirens stitched in the distance. A bus brake sighing, a laugh on a corner, the scrape of a chair on a balcony where someone believes speeches happen only on stages. I set tomorrow's agenda on top of the stack vendor call lender coffee site walk foundations module on covenants and turned off the lamp. The house breathed. The orchids did nothing dramatic. The petals held. In the quiet, it was easy to imagine concrete setting to the exact shape of the forms, something that would stand because we had asked it to and then done the work. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. I'll see you next time as we continue exploring more journeys and lessons together.